Chapel, the vicious, amoral killer. Bruce Stinson, who eventually came to be known as Chapel, was otherwise a comrade like no one else. Ironically, he slipped into his role only with the planning and execution of his best friend Al Simmons' murder. That incident was a catalyst to the creation of the dark vigilante, Spawn. We never find out much about Stinson's life before his job at the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America happened to him, except that he was born at a prison in Illinois. He grew up amidst the environment of smoking, inflicting torture, and philandering, making him the perfect malicious, criminal-minded sidekick and a planner of Simmons' murder. What Stinson clearly didn't foresee was himself being a lackluster match for the resurrected Spawn. His ex-colleague became more powerful, and the realization drove Stinson to death by suicide, but not for reasons that you may think. Also, if you are assuming things ended there, you couldn't be further away from the truth. We'll tell you exactly why.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Chapel, origins explored. It is quite rightly said that Spawn is the antiest of the anti-heroes to ever exist. Chapel's striking mark of identification, his war paint skull, did not remain that way for long. The transition into permanence happened when Spawn burnt his skin away and the skull beneath it all showed up. How, you may wonder? Well, let's dive into it. Chapel debuted as Bruce Stinson, a Black Ops soldier in Youngblood, the Image Comics series. He was presented as a CIA agent who had a chance to work alongside AI Simmons for Operation Night Strike. Stinson learned more about Simmons, the assassin par excellence, and became a friend to him. However, under the orders of his corrupt boss Jason Wynn, Stinson murdered his best friend, who he came to believe to be a spy. Wynn was simply at odds with Simmons and needed him out of the way. Simmons was reborn as the Spawn we know of today. Along with the plot of his tale, the Chapel was made the subject of several chemical injections. Assuming the powers and abilities of superhumans following that incident, he also ended up contracting HIV. Chapel never knew that this disease could be activated in him at his superior's will with the help of a special serum. The fact that one of the superiors in question was Wynn himself, who once was turned against Chapel for a while, attempting to eliminate him with the help of his old foe Ginger.
I killed them, but they come back. They won't stay dead.
All Chapel had done was to decline a task for Wynn. After committing Simmons' murder, Stinson happened to join a team of superheroes who were called Youngblood. Let us complete the circle for you here. The Skull story, as it so happened. Spawn at one point remembered how his once best friend actually murdered him. Not the one to forgive, he went on a hunt for Chapel. Spawn then carved out Chapel's skin on his face in the shape of a skull, something Chapel later got himself a skull-shaped bone graft for. He continued working with Youngblood for quite a while after being a part of adventures like confronting invaders from other dimensions. When they inundated John Prophet, a religious icon gave him a boost. At one point, Chapel was dismissed from service of the Youngblood, and he decided to gain an insight into Simmons' rebirth as Spawn, a Hell Spawn as he knew him to be. In due time, Chapel discovered that Hell was home to demons from all across the cosmos, where the Hell Spawns served as officers under Malebolgia, Hell's commander supreme. Hell Spawns were filled with a dark force known as necroplasm, making them immensely powerful, albeit within the limits of Hell. Curious if he would be able to assume similar powers, Chapel died by suicide. But instead of becoming a Hell Spawn, he awakened as Lord Chapel, a horseman of apocalypse. He now served a new mistress, Calcifer. When he was separated from this monster, Chapel transformed into a lady named Gazer, only to be changed back into a man and left feeling empty. In the arc for this character, he was even brought forth as the field commander for Bloodstrike, a covert superhuman team engaged by the US government for their services. Recently, Chapel actually appeared next to Spawn to battle Lord Chapel, his half-sinister doppelganger. Chapel, Jess Chapel and Todd McFarlane's Spawn. In 1997, HBO came up with the Spawn series created by Todd McFarlane. The character was named Jess Chapel and was voiced by Ruben Santiago Hudson. He remained the best friend of Al Simmons and an ex-soldier, much like in the comics. He was shown in the show as having a large build, a skull painted on his face, and donning military clothing while on duty. His casual attire comprised of leather jacket, blue jeans, a pair of gloves, and boots. Most other details like the presence of Jason Wynn, Chapel's job at the Central Intelligence Agency, etc. were kept the same as the comics had described. Heron 2, he killed Simmons and showed his antagonistic colors and layers, quite admittedly with artistic excellence on display. In the first season, Chapel acted as a supporting antagonist, then a secondary antagonist in the first part of the second season. In the third and final season, he had a minor role. Admittedly, the first season is mostly him being quiet and emotionless. In one instance though, Chapel was shown to have a flashback to when he was serving his country in the war zone. That is the maximum emotion we saw out of him in that season, as he apologized to the hundreds of people he had killed without remorse back then. The second season is probably his best human expression, where he regretted killing Simmons and refused to believe that Spawn was in fact Simmons. Chapel did go quite crazy and attempted to kill himself over the realization of his wrongful hand. First in the betrayal, then in the brutal murder of Simmons. Chapel's introduction in the series is at a strip club where he was drinking and watching the strippers. When he got a call from his boss Wynn, he decided to speak to him in private and went ahead to the bathroom, where Wynn gave him instructions for a task to be done the next day. As Chapel was about to step out of the club with a stripper in tow, someone attacked him with a knife. Chapel soon overpowered his attacker with a knife he had on him, cutting off the attacker's fingers altogether. As Chapel ended up in bed with the woman he left the club with, he had the flashback we spoke of earlier. Later, at the headquarters of the CIA, Wynn expressed his concerns over the breaking in that had happened at their storehouse of weapons and turned to Chapel out of sheer frustration. Several weapons were reported missing and Wynn was not pleased. The season proceeds with several rounds of mystery, interactions, post-murders, Wynn being a complete moron, fully in character we must admit, and a hunt for the missing weapons. At the beginning of season 2, Wynn sold arms to both sides of a war, with Chapel crackling by his side. Chapel did try to question Wynn, only to be shut down by an order to find the gun fragments along borrowy alleyways before they could be traced back to them. Chapel went about the task in a very Chapel way, ruthless and unmoved by the plight of innocent lives. He opened fire on the homeless, asking them to hand over his boss's guns, first threatening to kill them all if they did not cooperate or give away any information they had, then captured and tortured one of them. Spawn appeared therein and slowly approached Chapel. Chapel was unfazed and he spat on Spawn, refusing to acknowledge the cape of the now superhero. As they battled it out, Spawn too had flashbacks to the time when he and Chapel had trained together for their jobs at the CIA. The realization that Spawn is his old friend, Al Simmons, hits Chapel's like a truck. He tried to use a rocket launcher and blow up the area in which Spawn was standing, believing he had destroyed Spawn. Chapel lit a cigarette to counter the horrifying thoughts of his deeds just then. Spawn wasn't dead though, and he attacked Chapel soon after. As he emerged from the shadows and Chapel came across him again, Chapel decided to die by suicide. He failed at his attempt and pleaded with Spawn to help him, but Spawn decided to let him live and bear the brunt of his emotions.
No, I'm gonna let you live longer than you want to.
Chapel's emotions truly unraveled as he walked away from the scene, wishing death upon himself because he knew that he would be better than the sheer volume of thoughts that were about to haunt him forever. Needless to say, Chapel soon started to lose his mind. When he was apprehended and taken to the police station for questioning, he panicked and hit one of the police officers on duty. Chapel then admitted in an emotional tirade and he was responsible for Al Simmons' murder and that he would be dragged back to hell. Chapel, what makes him so powerful? Morals and ethics weren't quite Chapel's cup of tea, ever. He was evil, merciless, and a quiet but devilish maniac. The "everything is fair in war" part of the popular catchphrase was his holy book overall. As a CIA agent and ex-military person, Chapel had extensive military training, including martial arts. He was adept at using guns and swords, making him a daunting opponent on any given day. His hand-to-hand combat skills were also quite developed, and he was quite the marksman too. He knew how to the torture, and to top it off, he had immense strength that he used to his advantage all the time. Chapel was highly intelligent and a true tactician, knowing how to use several gadgets running on advanced technology. His only weakness was known to be the HIV he was deliberately affected with when he was being given other superpowers. Chapel closing in. Before Image Comics made Spawn out of one Al Simmons, he had a kill count high enough to be considered borderline greedy in those terms, and his soul had reached a point of no return to purity. Hell had its doors wide open with no security for his arrival at that point itself, but fate had worse plans for him. He was betrayed by who he considered a friend. That in itself was punishment enough. A deformed zombie, a whole demon, that is Spawn. Yes, coming down to the edgy factor of comic books, it is so opined that his position is unrivaled except for the creature in his own rogues gallery. The Edge is sophisticated and the guys are tough, as they are known to be some of the most heartless crooks and revolting characters to have been sketched. Chapel was one of the jewels of this crowning glory.
The shipment, and give them a bloody nose.
Who takes the fall?
Most frequent seen in comic titles Spawn and Youngblood, Chapel did, however, also have a couple of self-titled short-lived series. Eric Stephenson and Brian Whitten wrote the second Chapel series, which was published in 1995 and included Calvin Irving's art. In the live-action film on Spawn, Chapel was missing in action, but Jessica Priest seemed to have replaced him. The comic series he has been a part of may not have gained popularity or favors from readers because of a loosely tied plot, but the character stood out and deserves appreciation. Whether as the main antagonist or a side character, he has always been the one to leave a mark. We can only hope to see him written into stories that are more appreciated and with stronger writing.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.